Tommy, good morning to you. How you doing?
Yeah, hi lads.
So the Waterford performance, is that something that we need to bear in mind when we analyse just how back Limerick are, or are Limerick just back irrespective of the quality of the Waterford performance?
They are back, absolutely, because you can only play what's put in front of you. And no matter what, like, you have to turn up on the day, and by God they did. It was even more impressive there when you were watching it, say, live. I was looking at John Kiley, listening to that interview. The most impressive part he was saying was the work rate of his forwards, and that was, he hit the nail on the head there, because any time they didn't have the ball, they're like Tipperary at the moment. If you watch the guy on television chasing the manager, right, usually you will see that guy. He'll be chasing him as hard as he can. But it's the other guys that are maybe 5 yards behind him. When you see them chasing just as hard and maybe catching up, because what usually happens is the lad with the ball will usually be held up for a second or two, and that's where all them other guys come into play, not just the guy that's directly chasing him. And that's what I was most impressed with. Gearóid Hegarty, Kyle Hayes, Cian Lynch, every single one of them, they're just chasing back in numbers, even when it looked like they're out of the picture. But I was doing my calculations last night, here, and John Kiley just said there in the interview that the most important thing the next day is the 2 points. But to me, it looks like there's much more at play here. If Cork beat Waterford next week, which, you know, going on current form, you'd imagine that will happen. If Clare beat Limerick, Limerick are out on head-to-heads, because Cork have to play Clare in their last game, and whoever wins that will go on to 6 points. The other team will be on 4 points, along with Limerick. Say if they beat Tipperary, they'd have to beat Tipperary anyway. But if we just go back to the next game, if Limerick lose to Clare, and if Cork beat Waterford, I think Limerick are out. So right. Next week is going to be so important for Limerick.
And like Cork beating Waterford looks an absolute formality as well.
Yeah, at this stage it
does.
Yeah,
well, the pressure will be off, I suppose, Waterford, and you'd imagine there's going to be a reaction, Johnny. Like, I was looking back at last year's results, like, there's a lot of criticism that being directed towards Waterford at the moment. But if you look back to last year's results, they're kind of very much similar. The first game they lost by, I think, 9 points. The second game they drew with Tipperary, and then they played Limerick and they got bet by 10 or 13 points. So it's much the same as the first 3 results of this year. They lost the first game only by a point to Clare, and the next 2 games were hammerings. So, you know, they played Cork in their last game as well, Johnny, last year, and there was not much to play for Waterford, and they only got bet by 3 points, could have nearly won it. So sometimes when the pressure is off like that, they might come out with a performance, especially after all the criticisms they're going to receive this week. But yeah, for next week is going to be so important for Limerick, and it's do or die, really.
We'll talk about that in a minute, but what do you think has happened to Waterford? How have they gone from a team who were in an All-Ireland final and right there 18 months ago to what we're seeing now?
Yeah, well, sometimes that can just suck the life out of you, Ger. Like, they went to the All-Ireland final in such high hopes. Haven't won the All-Ireland since was in 1959, and everyone thought maybe this is their chance. And when it came down to it, there was a point in that game when Waterford could have went on and won it, and missed a few chances, and then Limerick came back into the game. And I suppose the feeling afterwards was that was Waterford's chance. They really had their chance that day, and I suppose that they never took it. But I think they're probably still, you know, feeling the effects of the hangover from that All-Ireland. Then this year, if you look at it, they went on and had, you know, quite a good league, got the league final, and then got hammered in the league final. And, you know, that must have took the life out of them again. And I think it's 2 things really at the moment, Ger. One is a total lack of confidence. They seem to be a team that is just totally beaten down. The other thing is, like I said at the start of this year, that I thought they were going to, you know, put a serious push on the All-Ireland, and it really did. But I also said that it was if they went and attacked it, kept their forwards up the field. I think this year they've even less forwards up there in the championship I'm talking about. So I was at the match the other day, and the ball go up to Maurice Shanahan in the full forward line. There could be 3 extra Limerick lads there. You don't have a chance. And like, the one thing people don't talk maybe about the sweeper is, yeah, it tightens up your defence, right? But if the opposition are really, really good, they're going to have extra players back in their defence, and you're inviting more and more ball on top of the forward line. And if you have a forward line of Gearóid Hegarty, Tom Morrissey, Peter Casey, Gillan, all these guys, the more ball they get, the better. And when you're playing with extra defenders, like in the first half, Declan Hannon, Richie English, all these guys, they were on the world of ball. Paddy O'Loughlin, the new guy, they were on the ball after ball after ball, and they don't just deliver bad ball into the forward line. Aaron Gallan spent most of the time in full forward on his own, but there was acres of space in front of him. When Tadhg de Burca was back in front of him, the boys didn't hit the ball in. They just hit the ball short to Cian Lynch, Tom Morrissey, Kyle Hayes out in the half-hour line, and they just totally bypassed the sweeper. So I just felt tactically as well, they're being badly beaten, because when the ball goes down to the forwards, it's coming back just twice as fast. Remember when we were there, when, say, back in the traditional game, Ger, when we hit the ball down to our forwards, we always knew when we were going well was how long it took for the ball to come back out. If our forwards were chasing and like savages up there, like Tipperary are doing at the moment, like the Limerick forwards are doing at the moment, well, then we knew we were onto a winner and we had a great chance. Like another thing I noticed the weekend was the Tipperary forwards, Seamus Callanan, the Bonner, these guys, when they're, say, 15 yards away from the guy that has the ball, their opposition now, they're chasing like mad. Seamus Callanan made, I'd say, a 40-yard run the weekend, and then he ends up scoring 1-3. That's what happens when you're working hard, Ger.
Yeah, and I don't
as well that, you know, it's just that both managers, Tipp and Limerick, the first thing they mentioned basically in terms of Callanan and Limerick is work rate of the forwards. But is where is the sweeper system in hurling after the weekend, Tommy? There'd be obviously so much negativity about both Clare and Waterford in that regard.
Yeah, I suppose I was never a believer in it, and I think it's the more analysis teams are doing on the sweeper system, they're able to bypass it. And I've seen just the weekend how Limerick were just so brilliant on the ball. Tipperary are the very same, so they're able to keep the ball. These guys are doing drills and training now where they're whacking the ball at each other from 10, 15 yards out, so they're used to this short passing game. Back when I was hurling, if you hit a short pass, it goes down, next minute the crowd are on your back. You just weren't used to doing it. Whereas now these guys are living it in training 3 or 4 nights a week. So I think the sweeper system, you see, you get away with it in your first year or two, because what it does is inspires confidence, and it inspires kind of, there's very few beatings that you will get, but you have to move on, and you have to evolve, we'll say. So what happens then is, I'll say the Limerick guys, they're doing things in training now to bypass sweeper systems. So if they see Tadhg de Burca or these guys in the way, they'll just hit it short to a guy on the run. We've seen probably the score of the year in the second half the other day. Cian Lynch got the ball out of midfield, did a lovely, I suppose, 25-yard dink, and it was not an easy dink, straight into the full forward line, instead running 30, 40 yards for the ball to be kind of a 1-2, took the ball back and over the bar. It was a beautiful score if you get a chance to look at. But that to me was just showing the modern game, that you have to be able to play it every way. And that's why, like, when you play the top teams, the likes of Tipperary, the likes of Limerick, the top teams have brilliant forwards. I heard Peter Canavan talking about it the weekend. Like, the reason why he rates Kerry so high at the moment in the football is they've brilliant forwards. And to win All Irelands, most of the time anyway, you need brilliant forwards. So when you go playing these top teams, if you were playing with a sweeper, that means there's going to be a lorry load of ball coming down on top of you. And if you have good forwards, there's only so much ball they need, and they'll do damage.
Do Waterford just not have enough forwards? Is that part of their key problem at the moment?
Well, I believe they do, I believe they do. And, I watched them playing minor, I watched them playing under 21, seen the big scores, even to put up with Derek and that over the last couple of years. I think they do, and I think the reason they went back to the sweeper system, I suppose, at the time was they wanted to stop leaking big scores. Like, if you go back to the Munster final a couple of years ago, was it 7-19 to 1-19? Then even Derek played in the Munster final where there was a good few goals scored that day as well. So I think the reason the sweeper system is primarily to stop leaking goals. And so I think Waterford, they have the forwards. The other thing, I suppose, if you look at it, Jerry, is if you play with a sweeper system, you have less forwards, right?
Yeah.
So you probably need big forwards, because you're going to be 1 versus 2 or 1 versus 3. You need guys that are ball winners, able to win the ball using their strength. You look at the Limerick forwards. You have Kyle Hayes, you have Tom Morrissey, and you have Gilroy Hegarty in the half-hour line. So if they are kind of up against maybe a sweeper, they have a better chance than most, because they're huge giants of men. Last year, the Seamus Flanagan full forward, same thing. You look at the Waterford forwards, you have the 2 Bennetts, you have Paragon Mattany, you have Tommy Ryan, all these guys, you have, the centre forward there. So basically, when the ball goes down, you're under pressure because they're small guys. They'd be better off in one-on-one situations where the ball is going in fast.
Let's talk a little bit about what happened to Clare at the weekend. Is this just how it's going to be, where it's Tipperary and Limerick in now a separate top tier with maybe Cork right there, but we just need to see a bit more proof of that. And everybody else a good bit behind. Is that just the pecking order that has been established over the first 3 weeks of the championship?
Yeah, but then pressure and that comes into it, and like the next day Clare are playing Limerick, and we all seen what Clare, like Limerick were heading to a Munster final. They looked like the farm team of the year last year. They went down to Ennis and Clare just steamrolled them. And that's it's hard to read it, like going on current form, yes, Limerick and Tipperary to me, after seeing both of them in person, are a step above. But anything can happen. The reason for it is, I suppose, Ger, is because the games are week to week. Sometimes if you have a big win one week, it can lead to maybe a bit of overconfidence. And no matter how much you try not to be complacent, you possibly think, yeah, we're back and we're this and we're that, and you can be caught. Then you have Clare on the other hand. I spoke about the weekend. Sometimes when you get a bad beating, or if a player gets the better of you, you don't need anyone to speak to you. You don't need a psychologist. You don't need that. It's a fire burning inside in your belly. When you're going to sleep at night, you can see the player that you're going to be marking. It's just something that you can't even talk about. It's just kind of bred inside you or born inside you. Well, I would imagine that there's a huge rivalry between Clare and Limerick. I'd say the Clare guys they're burning up inside after what happened to them the weekend, and then the criticisms that they would have received. So they will come out all guns blazing. Now, the one thing I would say about them is they need to come up with a plan if the opposition try and man-mark Tony Kelly. We seen the weekend, Tipperary just sent Brendan Maher, one of the most committed and players, in the GA at the moment. If you told Brendan Maher to run 10 miles over the road every night of the week, twice a day even, he'd do it. He just wouldn't even ask any questions. He'd just do it. That's the kind of discipline this guy has. They sent Brendan Maher running around after Tony Kelly the weekend, and he did a great job on him. Tony Kelly's job, much like Lara Corbett for Tipperary when he was hurling, his main, I suppose, attributes is running onto the breaking ball. He pops up here, he pops up there. But if you have a guy running after him who has no interest really, I suppose, in playing the ball, just kind of getting in his way and kind of, putting him off his game, well, then it's very, very difficult for him. So what I would think for Tony Kelly is, if someone puts a man marker on him, Ger, I'd put him in full forward. Let him put the ball. He doesn't have to run around anymore. Ball comes in and it's one-on-one. It's a sprint out to the left, a sprint to the right, maybe a high ball, use his ability in the air. So I think you put him out midfield, Ger, centre forward, run around. Because all you have to do is put a runner on him. So if Limerick do put a marker on Tony Kelly, I would be interested to see, have they a plan for Tony Kelly, Clare?
In terms of the Tipperary performance, they seem now to be finally maximising all of the available talents they have, even just deciding that that's going to be your role is going to be man marker of the opposition's best player, or if he's a runner in particular. Obviously you wouldn't put him in, I think probably going to put Brendan Maher in full back on a 6'4" full forward, but you know what I mean. Whereas everybody else is actually now playing pretty close to the peak of their talents. We started with Bubbles playing really well. Callan is back in form and working unbelievably hard. Bonner Maher is back to the form that we thought that was going to be the hallmark of his career when he broke on the team against you guys. And first, the two Mars are also playing to their level. I don't remember the last time that Tipperary could say, if only this guy was playing well, then everybody would play well. Literally everybody. The McGraths are playing brilliantly. I don't remember them all playing well at the same time.
Yeah, and I tell you, I know, you might think it's a very simplistic way of putting it, but it comes back down to their spirit, their heart, their work rate. I heard stories back last winter, Ger, of, say, a Tipperary player, he wanted to go to an event, I think it was out of the country, of a Friday. Tipperary had training that night. He told me, and this was very early in the year, it was before Christmas. He was told, oh yeah, there's no problem, you can go over to that event, no problem, but be back for training tonight, Friday night. Another two guys were going to a wedding, no problem, you can go to the wedding, but we're training that night, be there. So it starts like that. Lads just buy into it then. It's a tough way of doing it, but that's how you get the best out of guys, especially with the talent Tipperary have. Just watch I think they're the masters at the moment, with and without the ball. So we all see the brilliance of them with the ball, but look at them without the ball. Have you ever seen the likes of Callan, Bubbles, the McGraths? Have you ever seen them chasing so hard and so tough? It'll go back to the first interview Liam Sheedy gave before the championship. Basically, he said that it came out in the media all week, and I said he was getting a point across to his players that the Tipperary people, sometimes they're not happy with the work rate of the Tipperary players. And he was basically kind of, saying to his players, listen lads, this is the challenge I'm putting up to you. This is the challenge the Tipperary public are putting up to you. If you do this, they will follow you and they will love you. And that's exactly what's just after happening. It's after unfolding in front of our eyes. Sometimes, even for 20 minutes, Jared, they mightn't be going well, but they're working like absolute savages. Look at Shamey Callan the weekend. You know, he scored a point, I think it was, in the first half, but he kept chasing and chasing and chasing. Suddenly he finishes with 1-3. And that's what happens when you're doing that. John McGrath, 6 points. Like Noel McGrath. You know, people thought these guys, as you said, were starting to come to the end of their careers. Noel McGrath, 1-2 from midfield. The Bonner. We haven't seen the Bonner hurling like this in years. Like, I always thought when I was marking him, the biggest, the hardest thing marking the Bonner was his ability to pick up the ball and his ability to solo. He has this ability to just glide past you. When he can run onto a ball at full pelt, rise the ball and not break stride. Then he can wiggle in and wiggle around you. And that was the challenge marking the Bonner. You had to nearly stand off him. When he got the ball, you had to kind of take 3 or 4 steps back because you knew he was going to give you the shimmy and go around you. And he's back doing that again, gliding past guys. Like Bonner scoring 1-2. And it's not that Bonner can't score that. It's just usually he's setting them up and that he felt that was his game. Whereas now he's taking it on as well. Yeah, you're dead right. I've never seen him hurling as well. And Ger, it won't always be like this for them this year. So this doesn't mean they're certainties for the All-Ireland. But if they keep up this huge intensity, this huge work rate off the ball, possibly 5-6 forwards won't be going well, but still will be enough to go on and win games.
But the mad thing is now and how it's changed so quickly. Like Galway would have obviously been favourites to beat Limerick in the All-Ireland final last year, Tommy, but I'm looking forward to going to Nolan Park. I don't know if you're going on Sunday, but like Leinster looks absolutely miles off at the moment.
Yeah, it does, but it's a funny thing, Johnny, when you're watching games and then you go try and play that team. It doesn't usually work out like that. Like, you'd often be looking at a team there and you'd say, even as an ex-inter-county player, you'd say, gee, you could still do a job, you think. But if you went out, you'd probably get absolutely murdered. And it's the same watching a team. People watching Limerick, or watching Wexford, watching Galway last week up in Salt Hill. People say, we beat them by 5 or 10 points, and the Munster teams. That's not going to happen, Johnny. You play these guys and just games take on a life of their own. Up in Salt Hill last week when Galway and Wexford played, you have to bear in mind they often play in Salt Hill. You're playing against a wind that you've never seen before, and it changes direction. It's swirling, it's doing this, it's doing that. Then you take into play the Wexford tactics. So a lot of people were criticising the wides that happened last week. But with the tactics that were at play, you didn't have half a second to hit the ball. There was guys on you coming from behind you, coming in front of you, coming from beside you.
But Tommy,
so
if you compared the midfield, if you compared the midfield Tip have and their front six right now compared to Galway, Wexford, Kilkenny or Dublin, is there any comparison?
Yeah, but they're different games. They're open games. I would say I'd agree with you with Galway that they're not going well at the moment. Like, you look at most of their players, their top players, like take the last day, Joseph Cooney, only back from Australia, Johnny Glynn back from America, you know, in on the team or straight in after half time. Then you have the likes of David Burke, Conor Cooney. They're after losing a club All-Ireland with St. Thomas's. They seem to be out of form. Joe Canning is missing. So, yeah, like Daithí Burke played his first game of the year, I think it was, last week, in at full back. So there's a lot of things, you know, outside of what we're seeing directly on television that's going on with Galway, that if they can get out of Leinster, well, then possibly it can happen for them. I think basically I was doing, again, calculations last night, Johnny, and if Galway can beat if Dublin get beaten, I think next week they're gone. Possibly they're not playing next week, but the following week, if Dublin get bet, well, then it doesn't matter what happens after that. But yeah, no, looking at it, it's funny. You would think that the Tipperaries and Limericks are far in front of the Leinster teams, but I can guarantee you, I don't think it'll play out like that when you go to have to play them. It's
possible Tipperary and Limerick played 3 times this year, once in the round robin, once in a Munster final and once in an All-Ireland final. That's if I had to pick which teams that's the most likely to happen to, and I would really like to see that happen, because those 3 games could be one of the great trilogies of any sport, any time. They're at a level now where they could kill each other.
Yeah, absolutely, Jerry, because I suppose we're all thinking back to the summer of 2018 when teams were in the best form of their lives and all going head to head at it. This year, it's nearly always one team flying it, one team having a poor day, a bad day at the office. towards you get that feeling that if Limerick and Tipperary go at it, it'll be two teams at the full of their health, in the form of their lives, and it's like best man wins. And yeah, we'd all look forward to that. And I would be very interested to see how the Tipperary forwards react to the intensity, the doggedness of the Limerick backline. Like, you take Mike Casey, Sean Finn, Richie English, Declan Hannon back in the form of his life, Paddy O'Loughlin. They're even keeping guys off the team that were all stars last year. Like, yeah, I would love to see it, and what I would love to see is just the physicality of it, the doggedness, and just to see the challenges that are put to these players that are the great players of last year and this year, and how would they react. Like, how would the Bubbles react marking Richie English? How would Shamie Callan react marking Mike Casey? Paddy O'Loughlin, huge giant of a man, up against, Jason Ford. Like, it'd be absolutely brilliant, and I think that's what we're looking forward to this year. We've probably been, suffered from the greatness of last summer, and the games haven't been as good this year, so we're all looking for that belter-skelter where just two teams are just really, really in top form. So yeah, we'd love to see that, and probably two teams that are similar, real big physical guys and just working like dogs off the ball.
Enjoy, Tommy. Thanks a million for joining us.
Thanks, lads.